Hi, this is John Linneball from John Linneball Tutoring, and this is AP US History Video 13, Geography and Regional Development in British North America. The Split Begins, British Policies and Colonial Restlessness. And here's my website, my name, John Linneball, John Linneball Tutoring, and please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you like this video. Diverging aims of Britain and the American colonies. While the British pursued mercantilist policies, the American colonists had interests that conflicted with those policies. Additionally, American colonists took exception to other aspects of British rule. Don't know what mercantilist means? Don't worry, we're going to find out right now. Mercantilism. Mercantilism was the political and economic system guiding British and other European powers' colonialism. The first idea is that there's limited wealth in the world and that nations increase their power by taking more of the limited wealth. The main form, if not the only form, of the limited wealth was precious metals, such as gold, silver, platinum. The idea is that the precious metal store is the wealth of the nation. The second idea is that a nation can increase its precious metal stores by running a trade surplus, that is, selling goods worth more than the price of the goods the nation imports. It's actually still a pretty good idea these days. If your country is running a trade surplus, you're doing well. If you're running a trade deficit, you really should probably look out for what's going on. Anyway, the third idea is nations need colonies for cheap raw materials. The fourth idea is that colonies should not develop their own industries, but should buy manufactured goods from the mother country after shipping the raw materials off to the mother country. Navigation Acts and Mercantilism. The Navigation Acts were British laws that were meant to make American colonies play their intended role in mercantilism, which is the American colonies would sell raw materials to Great Britain, and they would buy their finished goods. So you can see here we have the raw materials going to Great Britain and the finished materials coming to the United States. Well, obviously not the United States back then, but the American colonies. Parliament made a list of enumerated goods that American colonies could sell only to Britain. Shipbuilding goods such as trees for ship masts, pitch, tar, those are all things that you could build ships with. Obviously the trees were the ship masts and other parts of the ship. Pitch and tar were things that you could use to waterproof the ship, etc. Profitable staple crops, rice, sugar, tobacco, indigo, and others such as wool, iron, hats, things like that. So basically, if it was a finished good, like a hat, you could probably only buy it from Great Britain. If it was a raw material such as rice, sugar, iron, and whatever, you could only sell it to Great Britain from the colonies, etc. Or vice versa. If iron came from Great Britain was producing iron, then I'm sure the colonies had to only buy iron from Great Britain. Good for colonies. So it was a guaranteed market for things like you see the fish and all these things up here, the raw materials. That's great, but it's also bad for colonies at the same time because Great Britain could resell the goods to other countries at a higher price. So basically they forced the colonies to use them as, in quotes, a middleman that did nothing other than raise the price. You can think of a ticket scalper. You know, all a ticket scalper does is beat you to the ticket office for a rock concert or a rap show or something like that, and then they just try to resell it to you because you didn't beat them and they bought up the tickets that you wanted. So you think of that and you go, geez, what a ripoff. And it is a ripoff. And think of any commercial you've ever seen on TV, you know, especially a store that calls itself a warehouse. Come on down to whatever warehouse. We cut out the middleman and pass the savings on to you. So that's what we're talking about here. So you can see why the colonies would be kind of resentful when they're saying, well, we could sell these raw materials to other countries for more money, but we have to sell it to you, and then you turn around and sell it to the same countries for more money. What's going on with that, Britain? Mercantilism and capitalism. While the two systems have obvious similarities, buying and selling commodities and producing good for profit, there are differences. For example, mercantilism involves extensive government trade regulation, such as the Navigation Acts, to ensure colonies play their roles. Capitalism generally opposes the government regulation of industry and supports free trade. The idea of the invisible hand of the market is the main idea behind pure capitalism. You might look at Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, that kind of thing. Basically, that says there's an invisible hand that controls everything, supply, demand, etc. So you don't need government regulations. Therefore, artificial legal trade barriers are anathema to capitalism. So in this context, Why would you force New England rum distillers to buy sugar from the West Indies if French molasses that will do the same job is cheaper? British mercantilism would demand loyalty to Britain. Pure capitalism would insist whoever could provide an adequate product at the lowest price get the business, and that the government just get out of the act of regulating who can sell what to whom. All right, let's move on. Poor enforcement of mercantilist laws. The Navigation Acts were hard to enforce. Britain was far away and enforcement was costly. And there were porous boundaries. It was really easy to sneak things in and out of the colonies. I mean, you can look at it this way. Think of how many drugs and illegal things get in and out of ports in the United States today. Now, think about going back to the 1600s or the 1700s on the, what is now the East Coast of the United States, the 13 colonies, basically. There's no technology, there's no radar, there's no GPS. It's really hard to tell if there's a ship even out there until it gets close to your port. It's certainly really hard to scan everything, and I mean, shipping was already huge. They were already shipping tons and tons and tons of things. So good luck finding contraband and keeping it out of the colonies. But anyway, back to this. For example, the Molasses Act of 1733 prohibited sugar and molasses imports from non-British colonies, but Massachusetts rum distilleries routinely used illegal molasses and sugar from French colonies brought in by Boston merchants. All right. The British colonial expansion and war with Native Americans. As British colonial populations grew, colonists pushed inland, which caused conflicts between them and the Native Americans over the land. These conflicts were often armed battles that differed from the previously discussed imperial wars, that is, the French and Indian Wars or the Beaver Wars, and other wars. These are just examples. In that the colonists, rather than the British troops, generally fought the wars. These wars helped the British colonists develop solidarity and an identity, while of course affecting Native Americans, removing them from their ancestral lands, virtually destroying some tribes, etc. And this is an image from the Wheeler's Surprise Wikipedia entry. Wheeler's Surprise was a battle in King Philip's Pequot War, 1634 to 1638. In New England, conflict between British settlers and Native Americans became increasingly violent, just as in Virginia. As the settler population increased, the Puritans forced the natives off native land the Puritans wanted. The Puritans wanted an ideal community, but their peaceful Christian values did not prevent them from violently forcing natives to move. A little hypocrisy there. This, combined with disease, decimated the native population and forced the natives further inland. The most violent conflict of early New England settlement years was the Pequot War. British colonists from the British colonists from the Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth colonies forced the Pequot from Pequot land. The Narragansett and Mohegan tribes allied themselves with the British in this endeavor. So the Narragansett, the Mohegans, and the British all worked to force the Pequots off their own land. The later warfare would essentially eliminate organized Native American tribes from New England, so apparently the alliance with the Narragansett and Mohegan didn't last, and the colonists eventually turned on them because Native American tribes just didn't last in New England. There were still Native American people there, it's just they weren't organized tribes. So this image is from the Pequot War Wikipedia entry, and that'll be in the description below if you want to look that up. King Philip's War, 1675 to 1678. After the Pequot War, relations were normal between colonists and natives until the 1670s when a new war broke out. The Wampanoag tribe, led by Chief Massasoit, had peaceful relations with Plymouth colonists, and Massasoit forged an alliance with Plymouth in 1621. However, in the 1670s, Plymouth settlers had been moving onto Wampanoag lands, causing tension. The trigger for the war was the 1675 execution of 3 Wampanoags who were found guilty of killing a Christianized, assimilated Wampanoag in a Plymouth court. So obviously, since a Christianized Wampanoag is almost kind of a white settler, the white settlers did not take very kindly to that and convicted the 3 people who they figured committed that murder and had them executed. So that annoyed the Wampanoag, and we'll see what happened here. So, the Wampanoag chief Metacomet, Massasoit's grandson, ordered attacks on several Massachusetts towns. destroying them and killing more than 1,000 British settlers. Metacomet was known as King Philip to white settlers. That's why the war was called King Philip's War. The Plymouth colony's retaliation was massive and enabled by the assistance of the Mohawks. Anyway, in 1676, the Mohawks killed Metacomet and the settlers destroyed several Wampanoag villages. The war raged on, and by spring 1676, the settlers killed 40% of the Wampanoag. The settlers also suffered massive losses. If you've seen the previous videos, you might remember the term Pyrrhic victory. You could call this a Pyrrhic victory for the settlers because even though they won, they really lost a lot of people and material and things like that. So, as Pyrrhus had to say, another such victory and we are lost. So King Philip's War was the deadliest European settlement war in terms of percentage and population lost on each side. Now, if you notice this sign here, Anawan Rock, 1676, they call it the site of the capture of the Wampanoag Indian chief Anawan by Captain Benjamin Church on August 28, 1676, thus ending King Philip's War. Now, if you notice before, you might say, but John, you said it ended in 1678. Were you lying or mistaken? No, this sign is a little bit mistaken because they're talking about the southern tier that took place in Massachusetts, but the northern tier continued until 1678. So let's take a look at the northern theater, So this was the southern theater. Northern Theater of King Philip's War. While King Philip's War in Massachusetts ended in 1676, there was a northern theater in Maine and Acadia. The English colonists and natives got along well until the English settlers heard of the attack on Swansea in 1675, which was the first native attack of the war in the Southern Theater. The colonists marched on native villages and demanded the natives' firearms, which the natives used for hunting. These native tribes were members of the Wabanaki Confederacy, which, if you've seen the previous videos, was organized to prevent British encroachment into Acadia. So, they allied themselves with the French. And after a winter where some natives starved after surrendering their guns, which made it a lot harder to hunt animals for food, and also after an incident where settlers shot at the Penobscots at Casco Bay and the drowning of an infant son of a Pequot leader, natives began raiding colonial settlements. Colonialists retaliated, and the natives successfully counterattacked, or retaliated to the retaliation, including attacks on Maine fishing fleets with a navy made from ships that the natives had obtained. So Maine is obviously a state that depends a lot on fishing, or a colony at that point, so that was a big deal. The war ended with the Treaty of Casco in 1678, after the native tribes involved, the Wabanaki Confederacy, learned that the Mohawks were going to enter the war on the English side. And you can see in the King Philip's War Wikipedia entry, you can learn more about this. By the way, the Mohawks were an Iroquois tribe that were not the same as the Mohicans, which were an Algonquian tribe. They were actually rivals. So if, like me, you get confused about these, please just remember the Mohawks and the Mohicans were not the same tribe. New England's praying Indians. Unlike Pueblo Indians, who were able to convince the Spanish to accommodate their culture to some extent, the natives of New England were much less able to get the English to accommodate their cultures. While some tribes attempted armed resistance, it usually ended disastrously for the natives. See the Pequot War and King Philip's War. Other natives attempted to coexist with settlers, some through conversion to Christianity and settling on farms. Missionaries created praying towns for converted natives to settle and use as white settlers would use a town. 14 such towns were created by the 1670s. Several, such as Nantucket, the island of fame for many limericks, such as "There once was a man from Nantucket," and I'm not going to recite any limericks I know that began like that, but anyway, you've heard them. And Natick, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, even though I went to college in Massachusetts, exists to this day. And you can see the Praying Town entry in Wikipedia if you'd like to learn more about that. Natives were still seen as inferior to white settlers, and the white settlers, etc., demanded that the praying Indians wear European-style clothing and completely abandon any native religious or spiritual practices. This contrasted with the French and Spanish priests, mostly Jesuits, who allowed natives to combine their own spiritual practices with Catholicism because it made it a lot easier to convert. the natives to Catholicism if they didn't have to abandon the practices that they already had, and they could make some sort of hybrid. Which is actually weird because that's where a lot of Christian holidays come from. For example, that's why Christmas is celebrated during the winter in December, because that's when traditional Yuletide celebrations were. So people who were converting to Christianity could say, oh, okay, we're going to use the same holiday we've always used. We're just going to say that it's to celebrate the birth of Jesus. Can't see why they couldn't do that again here. Native Americans in the racial hierarchy. In the early 1600s, the main attitude of English colonists towards natives was one of cooperation, trade, etc. Peace was important in large part because the English settlements were barely surviving, and let's face it, they wouldn't survive a war with the Native Americans. If they really tried to go all out against the natives, they would have just gotten killed, literally. Later 1600s, settlements became thriving colonies and could hold their own against natives, so large-scale agriculture, which was also developing at that time, changed the focus to taking native land. Remember how we learned about tobacco crops and how that really depleted the soil, so you could only use your huge tobacco field for a few years before it would become no good, and then you would have to go claim some more land from the natives, and the natives were not too pleased about that. So the natives did fight violence with violence. Hey, we need your land for tobacco. Well, no, you already took that land for tobacco. Use that. It doesn't work anymore. We want yours. No, and, bang, 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 bang. So now there's violence. Now there's fighting. So King Philip's War, of course, was an example, as was the Pequot War. Really, any war between white people and Native Americans is a good example of that. So the violence by the natives created a savage image, the image of the savage Indian in settlers' minds, which to settlers justified the settlers' taking of the native land. Of course, you're conveniently forgetting is, well, actually you moved here and took our land, and when we said no, and you said, well, we're taking it by force, we fought back, all of a sudden we're savage, From the Native Americans' point of view, that doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense to me either, but people believe what they want to believe when they want something. So here we go. Did you find this video useful? Please like it and subscribe to my channel. Neither action costs you anything. You'll be alerted about my new videos. Why do I care? It's simple. YouTube doesn't let me share any ad revenue unless I have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours. That's 240,000 minutes of view time in a year. While many people are watching these videos, I don't have 4,000 hours of watch time. I also don't have 1,000 subscribers at this time. If you'd like to see this without ads, you could join my community at testpreparation.locals.com, and costs a little bit of money to join, but not much, and you don't have to watch ads. For the same reasons, you are not only welcome but encouraged to share links to this video, put it in playlists, etc. And I'm always happy to read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos. Really, I am. I reserve the right to delete comments from and block those who specialize in destructive criticism, trolls, or things that are off topic, spammers and disturbed people. You can also hire me for tutoring. I'm glad to do it online through Zoom or whatever video chat you want to use. And if you are in the San Francisco Bay Area, as long as we follow whatever applicable social distancing, etc. rules, I can come to you. Thanks for watching, and if you want to find out my contact information, keep watching. Facebook, I'm at facebook.com/Linnebaugh-tutoring. Instagram, I'm at instagram.com/john.linnebaugh.tutoring. Phone is 415-623-4251. Email is john@johnlinnebaugh.com. My website is either johnlinnebaugh.com or johnlinnebaugh-tutoring.com. Either one will take you to the same website. And again, testpreparation.locals.com. Why not check that out? And my mail is John Linnebaugh Tutoring, 1859 Powell Street, number 109, San Francisco, California, 94133. And finally, note, this is not a substitute for your classes, text, etc. This video is based on the Barron's AP United States History Review Book, 4th edition, also based on the Princeton Reviews Cracking the AP US History Exam, 2019 edition. It's also based on several Wikipedia articles that we've mentioned in the video and my general knowledge of U.S. history, etc. While this should help you do well on the AP U.S. History exam, I can't be responsible for what your teacher thinks is important and ask you about in his or her own tests, homework, etc. So please read your class texts and pay attention to what your teacher says in class if you want to do well in your course. All right, hope this helped. Have a good day. War. So let's move on.